Hey guys, welcome back to another Permaculture Perspectives. I know that it's been a really long time since my last video, but life happens, so just bear with me, okay? The video that I'm going to make today has been in the works for a really long time. I had written up notes about it, and I'd even started it like 2 years ago, and then I just never ended up finishing it, so I finally got around to it. So I hope you enjoy. The topic is going to be deconstructing and questioning the phrase, work hard and you'll succeed. So if that's something that's interesting to you, stick around. Hey guys, welcome back to Permaculture Perspectives. So as I mentioned, today I really wanted to talk about the phrase, work hard and you'll succeed. It's something that I feel is a basic assumption of our culture, like Western capitalist culture, and something that really informs the way we live our lives. And I actually have quite a few issues with this statement and with the assumptions that underlie this statement. So I thought we could talk a little bit about that today and frame it as part of the social permaculture exploration that is the basis of this YouTube channel. So the phrase, work hard and you'll succeed, if you think about it, has a partner phrase, which is the negative version of that phrase, which is if you don't work hard, then you won't succeed, right? And so what does that mean? That means that working hard is a choice, right? You can choose to work hard and succeed, or you can choose to not work hard and succeed. And that means that there's also something called laziness. People who don't work hard or don't do things, we attribute the term lazy to them. There's this assumption under the phrase, work hard and you'll succeed, that there are some people who choose to be lazy, not work hard, and therefore they won't succeed. So let's go back to work hard and you'll succeed. What does that mean? What does working hard mean? So I guess in everyday language, working hard usually entails, and let me know in the comments if you disagree, working a lot, so like a lot of hours. It usually entails some sort of sacrifice, right? Like sacrificing personal time, family time, friend time for work. And work usually means doing some sort of expending our energy in a way that we get paid by money. So exchanging our labor for money. And it usually also entails some sort of exertion, like working hard to me evokes the image of like expending a lot of my energy doing something. Okay, so that's working hard. What's succeeding? So, and again, this is sort of like, if I were to sort of generalize, like what do I think most people think of when they say, oh, that's a very successful person? I think they usually mean someone who makes a good deal of money, and someone who is able to afford a high quality of life, and someone who is generally seen with respect in society. I think those are the main sort of definitions of success in general. Again, I'm going to contest this version of success, but I think in general when people use being successful, they think of these things. Okay, so let's go back to don't work hard and you won't succeed. AKA the laziness myth. So the idea that some people choose to not work hard and therefore are unsuccessful, I think is a complete myth. And I think the word lazy actually doesn't even need to be in our vocabularies, because I think it's sort of like a word we use to describe a symptom, not the cause. Like a cough, right? It's not a disease, it's just a symptom. I think laziness is a word we use to describe the fact that some people don't do work that is expected of them. Based on my life and my research, when people don't do work that is expected of them, it's not that they don't want to do it or that they are inherently lazy, but that there is something preventing them from doing it. And I think in general, the things that prevent people from doing their work fall into a few different categories. One of the categories that they might fall into is invisible life circumstances. This could mean invisible illnesses, mental health issues, or stress and anxiety. I think those are the most common ones. And I think a lot of the times people dealing with these issues are perceived as lazy by people who cannot identify or understand what they're going through in life. I also think that there's other hazards or dangers associated with the word or the concept of laziness. I think that we sort of internalize this too. Like sometimes we'll say, oh, I just feel like having a lazy afternoon where I just take a bath and read a book and don't do anything. And they connect that word lazy to the action of relaxing. Now, relaxing is something that every single human being actually needs to be healthy, both for their mental and physical health. Like it's a necessary requirement for human beings, relaxation, right? But when we connect relaxation with laziness, we create this almost guilt association. Like when I'm not doing this work that's expected of me and then I'm being paid for, then I'm being lazy, which is bad. And sometimes even when doesn't have to do with relaxation, but you just need to take personal time for whatever reason because you're dealing with life stuff, and you sort of rationalize it as saying, oh, well, I'm feeling lazy today. I'm not feeling great, I'm so lazy. Like, I'm so lazy is the reason that I'm not doing my work. But behind the laziness is actually like all this other stuff. That's the real issue, right? It's not the laziness. The laziness is just a description of not wanting to do some kind of work. So I think the focus on laziness and attributing that as a sort of like inherent trait to human beings that we have to battle with, I don't think that's very positive in general. And I think this is such a simple thing, but it asks us to shift the way we think about human nature, which I think is a very profound thing and something that is quite hard to do, actually. Like, I find myself personally thinking the way that we've been like socially conditioned to think. Like I feel myself attributing the word laziness to people when they're not performing as they should. And I think that's really harmful. And, I think we all could use a little bit of reflection in that area. Okay, so let's recenter a little bit. Let's go back to work hard and you'll succeed and talk about the bigger systemic problem that surrounds this assumption in society. So let's talk about this guy called Zygmunt Bauman. He's a Polish researcher and author, and he talks about something called the work ethic. And I'm not a super experienced person. I don't know all of his works, but I studied one of his books in a course that I took, and I thought it was really interesting. So the work ethic is essentially this assumption that we internalize that if people are not exchanging their labor for money in society, then the less they do this, the less worth they have, right? That people's worth is directly linked to the work that they perform that's in exchange for money. And that is something that came out of the Industrial Revolution. And the Industrial Revolution was something that was made possible through colonization and through the ideals of capitalism. And work hard and you'll succeed is intimately linked to the vision of capitalist society, that if we put a lot of energy into accumulating money, we can then take that money and put it to work making more money. Capital, right? And so we have this work ethic that was born out of the Industrial Revolution and is still very much internalized by people today. Our worth is determined by how much time we spend exchanging our labor for money. On top of the work ethic, and something that's a bit of a more modern day construct, is the idea of the consumer ethic. So that's the idea of the more we consume, the more valuable we are. And so think about this. If you're successful and you reach that level of success where you make lots of money, you're respected in society, and you have a high standard of living, an inherent behavior that you will probably have will be to accumulate, consume, buy more stuff. Now, the problem with that is the only reason that that's possible is because there are other people doing tons of work, usually in parts of the world that are physically at a distance from the successful people. People in other parts of the world are doing this work in order to produce things that can be consumed by the successful people. So people's success is only possible because other people are not successful. And I'm talking about people who work in like really low wage, exploitative positions in things like garment factories, and pretty much all the cheap stuff that we consumed is produced unethically. And those people who are exchanging their labor for money, which is a lot more labor for a lot less money than people in richer parts of the world are doing, like they can work themselves to the bone, but a lot of the times they don't have the prospect for the kind of success, what we define as success, right? If the world was only made up by CEOs and business owners and executives, then who would be there to produce all the stuff that those business owners and executives use in their everyday lives, right? So the only reason why some people can be successful is because there are other people who will never be successful. And I'm talking about success, again, in those terms that I defined earlier. That's called the zero-sum game. That's when some people can succeed only because other people can't succeed. That's the only way that this system works, and that's really messed up. Okay, so let's take a different approach. Let's try to redefine what work and success actually mean. If you look at the term capitalism, the word at the center of capitalism is capital. And capital is usually thought of as money, which can be used to make more money, essentially. It's this extra money or profit that can be invested to make more money. But what if we substituted the word money for resource? What if it's a resource that we have a surplus of that we can put to work to make more of itself? So there's this guy called Ethan Rowland who decided he was going to reinvent the way that we define the word capital. And so he actually thought up like a whole bunch of other ways that we can define capital. So I'm going to touch on some of the most important ones now to see if we can sort of redefine what it means to work hard and what it means to work in general. Okay, so one of the forms of capital that he defines is cultural capital. And the currency for cultural capital is collective ritual. So that sounds a little esoteric, but think about this. If we belong to a culture, which is can be defined as a series of behaviors that link people together and give us a feeling of unity, if we have a lot of culture, then that adds richness to our lives, right? We can experience culture through traditions in our families. We can experience culture through festivals, celebrations, a lot of social activities that make us feel part of a community, right? And if we have this culture, we can always be reproducing it, changing it, and making more of it. So if you think of culture as capital, and if you think of being rich in culture as being someone who has a rich cultural life, you can see how thinking of that as a currency and as yourself being wealthy in culture can be sort of mind expanding, right? If that's a little bit hard to grasp, try thinking about social capital. That's another one of the categories that Ethan Rowland defined. So if you think about someone being rich in social capital, what do you think of? For me, I think of someone who has a lot of connections, right? Someone who knows a lot of people, who can depend on people to meet their various needs, someone who has a lot of friends, and someone in general who feels locked into their community. So it's kind of similar to cultural capital, but it's just more about the social connections. And social connections can be your friends, your family, your acquaintances. And if you start to accumulate a little bit of the social capital, chances are you're going to have more social capital because it's something that builds upon itself, right? Relationships build more relationships. Now think of someone being rich in social capital, someone who has a lot of these connections and is able to use those to their benefit. And I think that's a really cool way to think about capital. You can also think about spiritual capital. And you can think of the currency of spiritual capital as being things like ritual or prayer or any kind of spiritual practice, right? Because the more we perform spiritual practices, the more spiritual capital we accumulate, the more sort of spiritual satisfaction we have. Someone who experiences a high level of spiritual satisfaction is going to be much more happy and fulfilled and satisfied in life. You can also have intellectual capital. Intellectual capital is dealt in the currency of knowledge, right? So when you start to accumulate knowledge, chances are you can use that knowledge to accumulate even more knowledge, because by knowing one thing, you become more curious about another thing, and your skills from those previous things help you learn about those new things. So it kind of builds upon itself. And someone who has a lot of knowledge can be defined as someone having a lot of intellectual capital. So all the things that I just mentioned, like cultural capital, intellectual capital, spiritual capital, all of these things are just basic human needs. They're all things that humans need to live a fulfilled life. And I think that if we're able to redefine work as doing something to accumulate more of these forms of capital, not just monetary, financial capital, but social, cultural, spiritual, all these forms of capital, if we can define work as, think about this. I go out and meet with my friends and have an amazing dinner. We have a really deep conversation. And I say, I was doing work. I was working to increase my social capital, maybe a bit of my spiritual capital. And, that's work. So I think that just redefining what it means to actually do work and what the word work itself means, can be a really good reflective process for people. And I think it can help us move away from this guilt-based definition of what work and laziness and working hard actually mean. But what about the word success? What does it mean to succeed in life? So I already mentioned what I think most people use the word success to mean, but I think that this word needs to be redefined. And there are a lot of social movements out there that are actually working to redefine the word success. One of them is the degrowth movement that I have a little bit of experience in, and they're very much working on the idea of social sustainability. So working on creating a society that meets human needs, that looks at justice as a measure of success, that looks at social relationships as a measure of success, that looks at having free time to spend with family and friends and learning new skills as a measure of success. And I think that's something that's really useful. So if you're interested in that, totally look up degrowth. There's tons of articles, publications, and books on that topic. And then there's, of course, permaculture. The idea of social permaculture as centering on our personal lives and forming, consciously designing our social relationships very much falls into redefining success. I think working through permaculture curriculums and learning permaculture has helped me to understand what I would define my success as. And it always comes back to these other forms of capital. Of course, yes, money is important because you need money to do things. That's just the way it is. But you also need community, you need social connections, you need mental and physical well-being, you need knowledge, you need experience and activities, you need all of these things. And valuing them just as much as the financial side of things, I think is really important. And I know it's problematic, but I think it's really important in the bigger picture towards shifting human behavior. If we put less value on money and consumption and shift our behavior and our energy to focus on building our social relationships and building our spirituality, building our knowledge, then I think we can help move away from a consumption-focused society, which is directly linked to a exploitative and unfair global system. I think that's just part of the way that we can help shift some really problematic parts of the system that we're all locked into globally. But I think people tend to undervalue this mental shift that takes place. Okay, that's about it for me for today. I'm sorry if this video was a little bit rambly. I just didn't know any better way to sort of organize all the topics that I wanted to talk about, but hopefully it will help you do some reflecting. And if you have anything you want to add or contribute, please comment below and connect with me that way. If you follow this channel by subscribing, then you'll be able to watch all of my videos that are coming up next. I do have quite a few planned, but I won't promise you that they're going to be like every week or anything like that. I'm just going to post one whenever I feel that I have the time, but I will continue posting. And thank you so much for joining me on this episode of Permaculture Perspectives. Toodaloo!